Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's July 17th, 2014. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, the political blame game begins after a flight is shot down in Ukraine. And President Obama proves that the pen is mightier than the AK-47 as he signs away Second Amendment rights. That's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
They're going for broke! This is it, dumbasses! There's no more time to screw around! Get yourselves in gear, police, that serve this system!
Well, war is breaking out everywhere. We have two stories, one about an airliner that shot down in the Ukraine, and that is being used by many parties to try to push for a broader, more escalated war. Also, Israel has invaded Gaza. We're going to cover both of those tonight, but first, the airline in the Ukraine. The FAA has been warning for quite some time for planes not to fly over that area. The FAA prohibited U.S. airlines back on April the 25th from flying over the disputed area where this plane was shot down. And also, the United Nations warned airlines back in April 3rd to avoid the area. Nevertheless, they did fly over this area. 295 people have been killed, no survivors from that plane. It's a great tragedy, but the greater tragedy would be to allow forces to expand this into a world war. And we've seen that narrative being used over and over again, just as we saw in Syria a year ago. Remember that it was just one minor royal figure who was shot that triggered World War I 100 years ago, approximately. How much more so could they use the death of 295 people to try to start World War III? Well, the question on everybody's mind now is who shot down the Malaysian airliner? There is a report that Paul Joseph Watson has put up, very good report, analyzing what at this moment everybody is saying, pro and con from both different sides. We're going to look, though, more at the press coverage and what the people in the United States government are using to try to push for war, how that's being echoed by CNN and others to push for it. Now, the Western press has wasted no time at all in immediately identifying the precise missile that was used and, of course, identifying pro-Russian forces as being the ones who shot it down. We see on CNN, and here's a story from the Mirror in the UK, showing the Buk Russian-built surface-to-air missile launcher. Now, they're saying that the altitude that this took place rules out the 15,000 approximately man-pad surface-to-air missiles that the American government has put in the hands of terrorists worldwide. So they say it needs to be something other than that, and they're identifying this Buk launcher. Now, they don't have anything really to go on by except for a tweet that was put up momentarily and then taken down, supposedly by the rebel forces. They supposedly tweeted out that they had shot it down and that came down. That should be suspicious to anybody who's been watching what's been revealed in the last couple of weeks from the Snowden documents, showing that the government has an all-out campaign to control public opinion through social media. But look at where they're coming from with this. They point out that the rebels had these Buk launchers, that they stole them from the Ukrainian government. Well, if they stole them from the Ukrainian government still has them. Look at this article going back to July. This is the 5th of July, and the caption on this picture says, Ukrainian government forces are maneuvering anti-aircraft missile launchers, Buk launchers, as they're being transported. So the Ukrainian government has it as well. Then we see a story from about 6 days earlier. On June 29th, there was a story that came out of ITAR TASS news agency saying that the Donetsk Defense Forces have taken control of an Army unit equipped with missile defense systems. And again, they identify that same Buk missile system, saying, however, that they don't know the number or the condition of the missiles that they have. Now, this should sound very, very similar. Just 1 year ago in Syria, there was a sarin gas attack. We were told at the time that the only possible suspect could be the Assad government, that they were the only ones who had sarin gas. However, there had been previous sarin gas attacks. And we learned from UN investigations, as well as from Russian investigations, that that sarin gas attack was done by rebel forces, not by government forces. Still, the Obama administration pushed forward, trying to push us into an escalated war. At that point, American forces released information showing the same intel, and that started to bring things down. Now we see the same thing happening here. We're told precisely what this missile is, even though they don't have any pictures or eyewitnesses of this missile. They say it must be this Buk launcher. And we're told that rebels had Buk launchers, so because they stole them from the Ukrainian government, so it must have been the rebels, even though both sides have possession of that same rocket launcher. Now, Strobe Talbert of the Brookings Institute has wasted no time at all. Remember that the Brookings Institute is a very influential think tank, perhaps the most influential think tank for the Democrats. It's left-leaning. And he tweeted out right away that Russia was to blame for shooting down the Malaysian airline plane. And he said he subsequently pulled that down, even though it had by that time been retweeted about 1,000 times. Now, an expert, an aviation expert in this article that Paul Joseph Watson quotes, Major Charles Heyman, told Sky News in the UK that it's likely that he thought Ukrainians were responsible for the incident. Why not? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But let's look at some more reactions. More Democrats are blaming Russia for the passenger plane shootdown. This is an article from Kurt Nimmo. This is a quote from the New Republic, and this is what this writer says. Make no mistake, this is a really, really, really big deal. This is the first downing of a civilian jetliner in this conflict, and if it were the rebels who brought it down, all kinds of ugly things will follow. For one thing, what seemed to be gelling into a frozen local conflict has now broken into a new phase that directly threatens European security. The plane, let's recall, was flying from Amsterdam. Now, she's not alone. CNN has also said this is a watershed event. For the first time, it focuses world attention on this Russia and Ukraine conflict. Really? For the first time? This is something that is not a local conflict. Our Western press has been pushing this so hard that they have succeeded in reviving the Cold War to the levels that it hasn't been for decades. So this is not anything new. What's new is that they now have another excuse that they can try to push, just as they did the sarin gas attack. And it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans as well. John McCain, of course, and I'm sure Lindsey Graham will be joining him. Those are the two war hawks that love to always push for war in every event, no matter what happens. Well, McCain says that Putin should pay if the Malaysian airline jet was shot down. He says it's determined that Ukrainian separatists, if it's determined that Ukrainian separatists shot down the Malaysian Airlines plane that crashed on Thursday, Vladimir Putin should face the consequences, said John McCain. And this is reported by Roll Call. Well, what would those consequences be? We need to ask about that, just as we need to ask what the consequences would be if we escalated the Syrian war as well. Now, is this something that could have been done by the Ukrainians, as other people have suggested? Let's remember history before we jump into an even broader war.
The globalists have controlled the mainstream media for a long time, but now they're expanding, making the weaponization even more vicious and deceptive. All the major networks are state-run.
We are partnering this year with the NFL.
The NFL has become a political weapon against the Second Amendment and pushes Obamacare. MSNBC tells us that our children belong to the state.
We have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
The brainwashing media machine has been turned up on high, and it's time for humanity to double down on the true people's media and strike back against the tyrants that are destroying our civilization with their lies and fraud. We are the resistance. You are the resistance. You are the info war. It is more important than ever to realize that we are not the alternative media. We are the true media. The establishment dinosaur press is dying.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
Join us at InfoWarsNews.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Members can share their memberships with up to 11 people. By subscribing, you will literally be buying war bonds in the info war to expand our operation in the face of the tyrants. Join us at PrisonPlanet.tv.